At 2:07 a.m. on October 5, 1930, the sky over northern France screamed. Inside a dining room suspended thousands of feet in the air, silver cutlery slid off mahogany tables. Men in silk pajamas were thrown violently against the walls as the floor tilted into a terrifying, unrecoverable dive. Outside, freezing rain violently lashed against 5.5 acres of rotting, tearing fabric. They were not falling from a building. They were falling from the clouds, and surrounding them in the dark, contained only by fragile animal intestines, were 5.5 million cubic feet of highly explosive hydrogen gas. This is not just the story of a crash. This is the story of how hubris, vanity, and the desperate pride of an empire built a flying bomb, filled it with its brightest minds, and sent it straight into a storm. Rewind just 1 year. The British Empire is bleeding its global dominance, and the sky is the final frontier. To bridge the vast distances between London and India, the government dreams up a colossal solution: the Imperial Airship Scheme. The crown jewel of this program was the R101. It was the largest flying vessel ever constructed, dwarfing everything that came before it. Over 2 football pitches long, it was a silver leviathan that blocked out the sun. It was meant to be the Titanic of the skies, an ocean liner floating on the wind. Inside, it boasted 2 decks, a dining room set for 50 with bone china, asbestos-lined smoking rooms, promenades with panoramic windows, and heavy wool carpets designed to mimic the finest London. Gentlemen's clubs. The man driving this dream was Lord Christopher Thomson, the British Secretary of State for Air. For Thomson, the R101 was not just an aircraft, it was his political chariot. He had a vital imperial conference to attend in India, and he was determined to arrive descending from the clouds, like a modern-day god. He even insisted on bringing his heavy antique silverware, crates of champagne, and a massive 200-pound carpet just for his personal use. But gods do not concern themselves with the laws of physics, and physics was already turning against them. The R101 was dangerously overweight, the luxury that Thomson demanded, combined with incredibly heavy diesel engines chosen for safety, added up to a mathematical nightmare. To get this behemoth off the ground, the engineers were forced into a desperate corner. They did the unthinkable. They severed the ship in half, right down the middle, and spliced in an entirely new section to hold an extra gas bag, hoping to generate more lift. But it wasn't enough. They were butchering the structural integrity of their own creation. The fatal flaw lay in the skin. The outer canvas was coated in a chemical called dope to tighten it against the airframe. But the dope reacted with the fabric and the rubber adhesives. It began to rot. It became brittle, cracking like dry leaves. Ground crews reported massive tears appearing just from a gentle breeze. Inside, the enormous gas bags were made from the membranes of ox intestines. Over 1 million animals were slaughtered to line the ship. But these fragile sacks were chafing against the rigid metal skeleton. They were silently, continuously leaking hydrogen. The chief engineer knew the ship was unproven. The crew knew it was structurally compromised. The meteorologists warned of a massive, violent storm system brewing directly in their path over France. But Lord Thomson was deaf to reality. He issued a chilling ultimatum: The R101 must fly to India. No excuses. I must go. On October 4th, as dusk fell and the rain began to spit, 54 men boarded the airship. As the mooring ropes were released, they drifted into a pitch-black sky, straight into the teeth of a gale. Before we enter the final, harrowing hours of the R101, take a moment. If you find value in uncovering the dark truths of history's forgotten disasters, hit the like button and subscribe. Your support allows us to keep analyzing the human cost of hubris. Over the English Channel, the nightmare begins. The wind is ferocious, tearing mercilessly at the weakened outer cover. The ship pitches and rolls violently. Passengers who expected a smooth, luxurious cruise are overcome with severe air sickness, clutching onto pillars as the vessel groans around them. Water pools on the top of the enormous airship, adding tons of dead weight to a vessel that is already bleeding hydrogen and struggling to stay aloft. The crew in the control car are fighting a losing battle, desperately dropping water ballast just to keep the nose from sinking into the churning sea below. At 2 a.m., somewhere over Beauvais, France, the unthinkable finally happens. The rotten outer fabric at the very nose of the ship fails. A massive, gaping tear rips open. The roaring storm rushes inside the hull, instantly destroying the forward gas bags. The nose drops. A steep, terrifying dive. In the control car, Flight Lieutenant Irwin rings the engine telegraphs to slow down, shouting orders into the dark. The crew pulls the elevators back and miraculously manages to level the ship out, just for a moment. But it is a hollow victory. There is no lift left. The R101 is falling from the sky. At 2:07 a.m., the R101 takes a second fatal dive. They hit the ground at barely 12 miles per hour. A remarkably gentle crash. It is little more than a heavy thud. The structure crushes inward, but the impact alone is completely survivable. Most of the men aboard are alive, thrown from their beds, confused in the dark. But as the colossal metal skeleton scrapes against the earth, a single spark flares. 5.5 million cubic feet of leaking hydrogen ignites instantly. The sky turns into a blinding white sun. Arthur Bell, an engineer, was standing near the engine cars when the heat hit him. He described it not as a fire, but as a solid wall of pure, white energy rushing toward him. He miraculously leaped through a hole in the wreckage into the wet grass, watching in absolute horror as the giant ship was instantly stripped to its bones by a towering inferno. Another survivor, engineer Harry Leach, fought his way through the flames, his clothes burning, trying desperately to pull others from the wreckage. But the heat was unendurable. Those trapped inside the promenade, the smoking room, the luxurious cabins, they had no time to scream. The asbestos lining they trusted was vaporized. The flames burned at temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. 48 of the 54 men aboard were incinerated in seconds. Among them was Lord Thomson, the architect of the disaster, consumed by the very vanity project he refused to delay. His body was only identified days later by his fireproof watch and the intricate monogram on his scorched cigarette case. When the sun rose over Beauvais, it revealed a scene of apocalyptic desolation. The Titanic of the skies was nothing but a scorched, twisted ribcage of steel, resting quietly in a French field, still smoking faintly in the cold morning fog. The British public was paralyzed by shock. Over 1 million people lined the streets of London as 48 coffins were carried in a somber, 2-mile-long procession. The disaster didn't just kill the passengers, it killed the Imperial airship scheme entirely. The enormous hangars at Cardington fell permanently silent, haunted by the ghosts of a failed dream. The era of the British passenger airship was burned alive in a matter of seconds. The R101 wasn't defeated by a storm. It was defeated by arrogance. It was doomed the moment it left the drafting table, weighed down by political ambition and the blind pursuit of prestige. It stands as a dark, unforgettable monument to what happens when leaders silence the desperate warnings of science. A magnificent flying palace built for a lord that became a searing tomb in the clouds.